Welcome back to Golfing Secrets podcast with myself, Paul Gray. In this week's episode, we've got a hell of a lot of stuff to cover. There's been some really good tournaments over the last sort of week. We've still got the lingering news with Live Golf, the PIF, and the merger that's going on. But also this week we've got the US Open coming up. So we've got a lot to get through, and for everybody that sort of tunes in, we're also going to talk a little bit about how you can shoot lower scores, but without actually changing your swing. Something that I've done recently, which has really helped, and we're going to cover some of that off today as well. So let's get straight to it. Okay, so as I said, we've got a lot to get through this week. We've just come off the back of a weekend which has had some tremendous tournament at the RBC Canadian Open. Now, this is the sort of pre-tournament before the US Open kicks off this week. We're going to talk a little bit about the US Open a little bit later, but really want to talk about the results and some of the stuff that's gone on this week, particularly at the Canadian Open. So we had a winner with Nick Taylor, who finished on 17 under with a final round of 6 under, and he actually tied with Tommy Fleetwood. Now, the tournament itself was a bit brutal. The rough was certainly tough. And this is one of the reasons why they use the Canadian Open or some of these tournaments in the run up to the US Open, because typically the rough is that bit higher, so and that bit tougher. So it gets them sort of used to playing out a real long, thick rough, and that obviously makes it hard for them. So it's a good tester for them to see how they're playing in the run up. Now, just to sort of highlight a few things here with the tournament itself. Now, Nick Taylor, a Canadian, so it's the first win for a Canadian in, I think it was something like 60 odd years, and so he had the full support of the crowd. But to be fair, he beat Tommy Fleetwood, who also was getting a good deal of support, and it just sort of goes to show really that the Canadian supporters, although clearly they're absolutely rooting for their sort of home favourite, they're pretty fair in their support for all of the other players as well. And as a proud Brit, we actually had 4 Brits in the top 8, which I don't honestly know when that last happened. It would have been quite a while back. And so to have 4 Brits in the top 8 was something else. So we had, Fleetwood tied joint first with Taylor, the eventual winner, who won it on a playoff. So they played 4 extra holes and lost it. They played the 18th twice more. They then played the par 3, I think it was the 9th, and then they played the 18th again. And Nick Taylor won it with the longest putt I've certainly seen in sort of tournament history. Certainly, it was 72 foot long. I think it broke, obviously, his longest putt he'd ever hold on tour. And I'm sure there are probably some other records that it broke in terms of winning it or putting out that length to win a tournament. However, I do have to feel a bit sorry for Tommy Fleetwood. Now, I say sorry because I'm definitely definitely a real supporter of Tommy Fleetwood. Being a Brit myself, clearly I'm certainly going to be cheering him on. But he's come so close over the last few years. He's had lots of wins on the European Tour, but just hasn't quite managed to crack it in the States on the PGA Tour. And I think this was probably his best chance of doing that, given his position going into sort of the final few holes. He was actually coming down the 18th hole and needed to birdie the 18th to win. Now, the 18th hole had been giving up birdies all week, and he hit a drive which just peeled off a little bit right into the first cut, and the first cut at this course is pretty severe. So he didn't really have. Well, he took an iron to lay up, and then try and hit the green in three, and then one putt to win the tournament. But instead, the shot that he played or to try and lay up, he carved it off and into the rough, into an even more difficult sort of position, really, and didn't really give himself an opportunity. Now, the question here was his choice of laying up when, in fact, the ball after his tee shot was actually laying pretty well, and certainly felt that he could have got a wood to it. And there's been a lot of debate about, was it the wrong club selection? I mean, I suppose given the result, it probably was. But at the end of the day, he still managed to, do pretty well to tie and not make bogey. In fact, with a fantastic sort of up and down in the end, and it really just sort of really felt for him to not get the win. And I think he's certainly showing that he went off form for a little while and has started to come back and has been getting some really good results, certainly over the last sort of 2 or 3 months. And he's just starting to show that form again, which led to him winning sort of a number of times on the European Tour. Now, some other Brits that sort of also did well. So Tyrrell Hatton again had another fantastic final round. He certainly likes tough courses, and this was certainly that. And he finished with an 8 under final round. The lowest final round actually was 9 under from Eric Hull, another American. But for Hatton to have another good final round going into the US Open, I think shows some good signs. And also he also tied third with Aaron Rai, another Brit as well, and Justin Rose came 8th. So as I say, for the Brits, it was a good tournament. Good to see some Brits playing well on a tough course going into the US Open, and it'll be good to sort of see how they sort of fare going forward. But real feeling it for Tommy Fleetwood. But what a fantastic finish, and what a way to lose it really to such a momentous putt on the 18th or on that final playoff hole. So great tournament to watch. McIlroy disappointed again. He was actually only 2 shots behind going into the final round and just really couldn't get anything going. If I'm honest, I think with all of the stuff that was going on and all of the news that came out, it did look as though he seemed to be okay when he was on the course, but there was an element of him he looked weary, which is unusual for McIlroy, given how fit he is. And I think hopefully he can maybe get some rest before going into the US Open this week, because without a doubt that will really test your mental approach as well as your skills with the golf clubs. So it's a shame, and we'll talk a little bit later about what the prospects are for who may or may not be able to win the US Open this week. So it was good. And I also just noticed that Sam Bennett, who finished highest amateur at the Masters this year and has now turned professional since, he finished tied 20th in the field last week, so he's sort of getting some good results as well. So it'd be interesting to sort of see what happens. In fact, I think in the US Open, because he was the amateur winner, or he got some status or won some amateur either event or series of events, meant that he'll actually be playing in the group with the current US Open champion, which would be Matt Fitzpatrick, and another. I don't know who the other person would be. So, but we'll cover that as we get into the US Open side of things. But no, a fantastic tournament. I wasn't really intending to watch that much of it, but because because quite a few of the Brits were involved, I certainly had a bit more interest in it. So it was good. It did go on to the early hours as well, but because of the playoffs. But there we go. That's it. Hopefully, Tommy can sort of take that good form as well as Hatton into the US Open. But it was quite interesting actually to sort of see. There's a few funny moments as well. You know, when the playoff was sort of going on and when it finished. If anybody knows one of the golfers, Adam Hadwin, got tackled by a security guard as he went to celebrate on the green with Nick Taylor. And it's quite funny if you search online for Canadian Open Adam Hadwin golf or something or other, you'll see videos of this security guard sort of tackling him, and it was quite funny to see because the security guard himself had come from literally from the front of the green right up to the back of the green, which was where Adam Hadwin had been watching from, and and sort of tackled him to the ground almost. So it funny to see, and it was quite it's quite good to sort of see. So Nick Taylor, being a Canadian, he's obviously hoping to play in the President's Cup against the American team, which is the equivalent of the Ryder Cup, but it's America versus sort of the rest of the world, excluding Europe. And so a few of his potential sort of teammates in the President's Cup team were all around watching the sort of final playoff holes, you know, to sort of support him or to support their home sort of player, as it were. But also the Europeans, so there was Lowry and Rose and a couple of others. Hatton was there as well. They were also all there. They all came out as well to support Fleetwood in the playoff. So it was quite funny and was good to sort of see. But yeah, all round a great tournament actually, and one certainly. If it's like that next year, certainly be looking forward to that. But in terms of other sort of tournaments, so we've had the LPGA Tour. There was the ShopRite, I think it was the ShopRite LPGA Classic, which was won by a lady called Ashley Buha, who is a South African, and she actually won the Women's Open in 2022, so last year. And that was her first major win. She's actually had something like 20 odd wins, or professional wins. The bulk of those, I think 12 or 13, might even be 14 of those wins were actually on the Sunshine Tour, which is the tour which is in Africa. But she's had 5 European Tour wins, the 1 major, and now 2 LPGA wins as well. So she's certainly up there in terms of what she's managed to do, and certainly sort of hats off to her for that. So good win for her. On the DP World Tour, it was a slightly different event this week. It was the mixed Scandinavian Open, and there was a win for a Brit again. So Dan Whitnell, who's been on the tour for about 14 years, he won the event. Now it's a mixed open event. Now they play the same course as the ladies. So it starts off. There's 144 players. Half of those are women. Half of them are male players, and they mix the groups up as they start it off. So they'll typically have 2 men with 1 lady, or 2 ladies with 1 man, and they'll play the courses. The ladies play off the ladies' tee, and the men off the men's tees. And the reason for that is purely, it's no detriment to the ladies, because it's just it's a simple fact that they just can't hit the ball as far. So the way they've set up the tees and the course is so that it enables similar length shots to be being played for approach shots to greens. So they set the tees so that, however far the ladies drive it, it's sort of comparable to where the men are likely to be. So they're coming in with similar length sort of clubs, and it certainly has sort of produced some great play from from women and from the men. And this year, so Dan Whitnell, he won overall, won by sort of I think it was 2 or 3 strokes. I'll have to sort of check it, but I think he won by two. Yeah, I think it was 3 strokes. So he was 21 under. And there's a guy called Crocker who came second, and so he was 3 shots behind. But Anne Van Dam was tied third at 15 under, which is some achievement. And she's done particularly well. And I think there's Maria Sagstrom also. She was another lady who did really well, and she tied 12th. So it just goes to show that it isn't always about distance. And I think I've talked before on previous episodes about the ladies' game and how we can learn so much from it as amateur players. And certainly, I've learned a lot myself over the previous sort of months in terms of how to improve my game and play a better game, taking insight from the ladies' game, because it's so much more close to my game than the men's game is for me, or the men's professional game, certainly in terms of distances that they're hitting the ball. And so I think we can certainly learn that. Now, I did actually want to watch a lot more of the ladies' game of recent, but with some of the tournaments that have been being played recently, I haven't sort of managed to do that too much. But I'm hopefully going to try and do that over the coming sort of weeks and months, and certainly watch some more ladies' golf, because it's, I think as I say, we can learn as amateurs a lot more from it. But so a big well done to Anne Van Dam, and again another great event. One thing you do sort of notice though with a lot of these, this comes under the sort of the DP World Tour sort of brand of tournaments, and you look at the purses for these. They only had a purse of sort of €1 million, and you compare that to the sort of purses that they've got on the PGA Tour, at 20 million an event or whatever. It becomes crazy, and it's just such a shame that there isn't a lot more money going into sort of ladies golf. Now, talking of sort of money coming into sort of golf, I think with the LIV. I say the LIV, with the merger between PGA Tour, DP World Tour, and also the Public Investment Fund, the Saudi Public Investment Fund that we talked about last week. Hopefully, that will lead to more money coming into some of the sort of lower ranked tours, and hopefully that can also include the ladies, because the sort of money that is being bandied about that's going to be invested is phenomenal. We're talking billions and not millions, and if a lot more of that money can be spent lower down the ranks, in the tours like the DP World, the Ladies European Tour, and equally the ladies the LPGA as well. It would be really good to get some more money into those events, because for me, for sure, if there's certainly more events that I can attend that are perhaps in the UK, if there's more European events being held, then for me, I would certainly want to go and see more of that. Because I think we here in the UK, I don't think we really get to see that much, or not as much as I certainly would like to. So hopefully there'll be some more money coming in off the back of this new deal. But talking of the new deal, at the moment, it's all speculation, and it feels a little bit like they're sort of they've agreed to do this merger, and without really knowing exactly how it's going to be done. It's very, very sketchy. There's more questions than there are answers at the moment, and it's a shame, but the fact that nobody except for potentially 2 or 3 people knew this was going to happen. But it does beg the question. Now, the PGA Tour and the DP World Tour are both their members' tours. They're tours for the members. And so the members should always have a say as to what happens, you would think, but it doesn't seem so. It seems as though this decision has been made by, just 2 or 3 people really, and it's interesting to sort of to note that, and I think that it's really going to be interesting to see what the sort of the pecking order is. Ultimately, the PGA Tour, in my humble opinion, have had no real choice. They couldn't keep going down the litigation route because they don't have that bigger pockets. They've got deep pockets, but not as deep as the Saudi Investment Fund and or the Public Investment Fund. And I think that I don't really think they had that much choice, and I don't think that they wanted to go down that route and in effect scrape the bottom of the barrel just to keep fighting, when in fact they could maybe have a lot more money to spend and be able to sort of have an element of control. Still very, very early days. There's lots of questions still to be answered, and could probably do a whole podcast just purely on this with all the questions that are unanswered, but it would all be speculation. So we're going to sort of see what comes out of it over the coming sort of weeks, and just see where it goes. Really, it's going to be certainly an interesting few months, or probably about 6 months. So it's going through to the end of 2023 season. So there's no changes until the start of the 2024 season. But bearing in mind the 2024 season starts actually towards the end of this year, so because it's a wraparound season. But be interesting to sort of see what happens with that. One of the questions that has been discussed, though, is what's going to happen to the LIV Tour itself. Now, the LIV Tour is funded sort of somewhat differently. It's run, obviously, and headed up by Greg Norman, who has taken a lot of stick for it, and is not at the top of everybody's Christmas card list, but it's going to be interesting to sort of see. Now, he wasn't aware of this change. He wasn't even involved in the conversations about this merger. The first he heard about it was along with everybody else, and along with McIlroy and the likes. So it's going to be interesting to sort of see what happens to LIV. And there's a lot of people saying that they don't feel that LIV will be able to continue. So we're going to sort of have to see. They are saying that there will be a team element as part of this merger, but what that looks like, we don't know at the moment. So it's going to be interesting to sort of see. I think there's going to be a lot more opportunity for some of the top players. It's going to be interesting to see what it means to the players that are sort of lower down the ranks, because again, none of them really sort of know. And again, this is all speculation, but there's talk of payments being made to all the members of the tours to sort of in effect sort of compensate them and almost appease them, so that they don't sort of start complaining and causing sort of problems. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. And I can't believe that they're going to sort of not compensate. Certainly it'll be different levels for different levels of player. You've got your top ranked players, you've got the McIlroys, the Rahms, the Schefflers, and all of those players. So there will be an element of compensation for them that I'm sure will far outweigh what some others will receive. How that compensation is made, we just don't know. So it's certainly going to be an interesting time over the coming few months to see how that goes and what actually sort of happens. But that's really sort of the news from the tours, I suppose, this week, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the sort of coming weeks. Just as a last reminder, just do check out the video with Adam Hadwin, RBC Canadian Golf. Just search for that, and take a look at the video with the security guard sort of tackling him as he was going to go and celebrate with his teammate. So do check that one out. So it's on to other news, I suppose. Now, the bit I was going to talk about, the whole idea and aim for this podcast is to obviously give an insight and a view and opinion on what's happened across the golfing sort of world, the results, and what we can take, and just generally sort of talk about the tours and the different types of events, what happens with a lot of the players. So that's one element of the podcast, but the main element really was to try and help everybody improve their golf. I'm striving to get down to scratch, and it's certainly been a struggle over the last sort of few months really. My handicap really, as I went into the winter last year, was sort of 4.5. That's my exact index, and I'm now up to 6.5. So there are a number of reasons for that. I don't feel as though I'm necessarily playing any worse. I don't think that my swing hasn't changed significantly. We've made some tweaks for sure, but that's not what really has sort of been costing me. But one of the things that I wanted to cover off today was that I've made a conscious decision, I suppose, to play slightly differently sort of going forward. And when I've always sort of known my distances and done that sort of stuff, and I've always known my yardages for a full swing, a half swing, an 8 o'clock swing, a 9 o'clock swing, and known my distances in that way. And over the past couple of months in particular, I've tried to just sort of shorten my swing and in effect really just do a 10 o'clock swing. And up to this point, I've always thought I've sort of known my distances, and I've sort of tried to sort of gauge what I think my 10 o'clock swing might be, as opposed to a full swing. Now, by full swing, I'm talking, bringing the arms up and round to say the 11 o'clock position, or further if you're flexible enough to do that. So I consider that to be a full sort of swing. But of recent, and in particular taking sort of a lead from the likes of John Rahm, Tony Finau, who have really short backswings, but still generate enough pace and speed to get the ball out there. And so I've been working on doing a much shorter swing and swinging to just 10 o'clock. Now, I thought I knew my distances. I've always had them in my scorecard holder. I've got a little template that I use to record my distances with my clubs, and I really thought I sort of had them nailed. But what I found with looking at my numbers and the stats and where I'm finishing with my approach shots, I was either coming up very short or going very long, and so clearly there was a bit of a mismatch there. So I actually spent some time, and I actually paid to have my distances recorded and get my exact numbers for my 10 o'clock swing, my 9 o'clock swing, which is more half swing, and also my 8 o'clock swing, with pretty much every club in the bag. And what it really sort of highlighted to me was that, the distances that I thought I was hitting it, I certainly wasn't. Some were a little bit further, but some were a little bit less. And it really sort of opened my eyes. And I hadn't probably properly done my distances for probably almost 3 or 4 years. I just sort of assumed they were similar. But the difference was quite something. And I've now taken that into the last sort of 4 or 5 rounds that I play, probably maybe 6 rounds now. And the difference it has made has been incredible. It really has. I've hit a lot more greens in regulation. My greens in regulation now has actually gone up from, I was only averaging sort of 30% greens in regulation, which is way too low for my handicap. And I'm now hitting, over 50% greens in regulation, and that's purely by knowing the exact distances that I'm hitting those clubs. So the big recommendation this year to help you or for this episode to help you improve your golf is to go and get your numbers measured. You can probably do it at most golf clubs if they've got any form of a tracking device, be it Foresight, GC Quads, or whatever it is, TrackMan or any others, and go out and get your distances absolutely nailed. Because one thing's for sure, even if you're hitting it and missing the green, you're carving it out a bit right or carving it out a bit left, at least the ball's getting level with the pin, which invariably does tend to make it easier for your up and downs. Because if you're always coming up short to greens, then you're always playing shots up to greens typically, or directly down to them, and that is a lot harder. Whereas if you're level with the green, you're at the same level as the pin. So typically, you're going to have a slightly easier up and down, maybe more green to sort of work with. And what it does mean is that when you're aiming at pins, aim to hit as close to the pin as you can, but aim to look for the good miss. So if there's a lot more space on the right hand side, meaning if you do miss right, you've got a lot more green to hit with your up and down, then it just makes the whole process easier. And that for me has been a massive help, and I've been shooting a lot better now as a result of doing that. And a lot of this came from the lesson that I had with Sean Evans, or the seed was planted with the lesson that I had with Sean Evans. And we talked about, my fairways hit and greens in regulation, and she just sort of queried some of the distances on my yardage tracker. And it sort of just got me thinking about it. I got my wedges sort of checked, and then got the yardages checked for all of my clubs, and as I say, it's made an immense difference. Now, our course, like probably quite a few this time of year, it's really sort of started to get quite tough. The rough is really up, and combined with the having some low scores coming off my WHS handicap, or my best sort of 20 or the last 20, it's been quite tough to sort of maintain my handicap. But with these changes and knowing my club distances a lot better now, I'm certainly feeling a lot more confident going forward, and to try and really start to get the handicap back down to sort of where it was, and then hopefully beyond. So so that's the sort of the tip, if you like, for this week. And that's, if know your distances, go and get, if you can, do it at a local club or a local range. If they've got the facility to measure your distances with your clubs, then spend some time doing it. I can guarantee it will help and will be worth it. And don't go all this big bollocks stuff and think you can hit your 7-iron 180 yards or 160 yards or whatever. If you can't, just know your yardages. Just, it doesn't matter. Nobody really gives a what club you're hitting. If it hits the green, it's hit the green. It doesn't matter. So take the ego out of it, and just go with the distances that you're hitting it, and it will really help. Now, you can get a copy of, I've got a stats tracker that I use to record all the yardages for my clubs. You can get a free copy of that if you want. Just go to howtopractice.com/distances, and you can download a copy there to help. So do that, and hopefully that will help with the games. And so that brings it to the end of sort of, I suppose, my news in terms of my handicap, and move on to the US Open. So we've got the US Open this week. It's at Los Angeles Country Club, a real interesting course. I've heard it described in several different ways. Some have said it's an old classic type course. I don't really know what an old classic type course is, so I'm not sure what is meant by that. But what I can say is that It's not short as you wouldn't expect. It's a major after all. It's playing over 7,500 yards, so that's certainly a long course. One unique feature is it's got 5 par 3s, so that's quite interesting. But those par 3s are very, very different. One of them is in fact almost 300 yards, and I think that's the 11th hole. So you can actually stretch it out to over 300 yards on the 11th hole. And then they've got another par 3, which I think they can even play at 70 or 80 yards, but landing on a green that's about the size of a postage stamp. So, it's going to be quite quirky. And of course, being a US Open, the rough will definitely be up. It will maybe not be quite as hard as some of the courses that the players have played on of recent. I'm thinking of Muirfield Village, so Jack's course, Oakdale last week. Again, the rough was really tough at Oakdale. So I think because they haven't had so much sort of bad weather there, they haven't had so much rain, that the course itself may not be quite as tough as, say, some of the ones they've been playing of recent. But it is US Open, so it will be tough, whatever. And it is really a, it's a US Open is a tournament where you have to last the end. There's not going to be really low scores. There's not going to be it's unlikely there's going to be a 15 under winner. Normally it's closer to par for the winning score. So it's going to be really interesting if there's 2 or 3 players below par, maybe with everyone else par or over. So it will be tough. And sort of with that in mind, I just want to sort of go through sort of my sort of picks, I suppose. Now, it would be quite easy, to be honest, to go for world's numbers 1 and 2, Scotty Scheffler and Jon Rahm. I'm going to go with Scheffler as my top pick. I think, given it is a US Open, the roughs is going to be tough. It will be tough, whatever. I think his tee to green at the moment he's streets ahead of anybody else in terms of his tee to green stats. He hits more greens in regulation. He's absolutely got that nailed. There's nobody anywhere near him in terms of that particular stat. The only thing is can he sort out his putting? If he sorts out his putting and he still has his tee to green game, then I think he'll be an outright winner, and quite a clear winner. However, he does need to sort his putting out. That's been the thing that's been sort of hurting him. Although, having said that, even over the last, I think it's something over the last 6 or 7 events or something or other, he's not been out of the top 12. And he's finished runner-up in 2 of them, PGA and was it Jack's Place, I think. So he's absolutely there or there. He's always there or thereabouts. And you can't count him out. And I think for that, and given the type of course it's likely to be, tee to green, if he can sort his putting out, I think Scheffler's the main pick for me, at least. Now, another close second for me is not going to be Jon Rahm. I don't think that the last time we saw Jon playing, didn't finish particularly well. And I don't know, it feels a little bit like Jon Rahm has sort of taken his foot off the gas. He's got 1 or 2 kids now, and I think he's sort of enjoying that sort of side of the life, which is great for him. But I'm just not convinced with the way that he's been playing recently that he can win it. Now I wouldn't mind if he did. I do obviously like Rahm, but I think it would do. The other one I would like to say I would like to win would be Fleetwood. Fleetwood would for me be an outside pick, just purely because of the way that he's playing. I think he's really coming together with his game. Disappointing result last week for sure, but I think that he's got enough game to take it, and he doesn't seem to ever be sort of phased. The way he took that loss last week was something else, and he seems to smile through it, and I think that takes a lot. But my second pick is going to be Hatton. He likes tough courses. Again, he's won at Jack's Place before. He played well there this year at Muirfield, and he's got this habit at the moment of having really good final rounds on tough courses. And I think that, together with the fact that he has just generally been playing really well recently, I think he was top 5 at Jack's, top 3 last week, both tough courses. PGA, I think he was there or thereabouts as well. So I think he's in with a good shout. If, and it's a big if, he can sort of keep the temper down and keep his emotions under control. It's the one thing that can sort of let him down. All aspects of his game, all round, are fantastic. He's strong in every area. He drives the ball well. He's got good approaches to the green. He's good with his wedges and up and downs, and he's a good putter. So he's got a good all round game, and you're going to need an all round game to win a US Open. There's no doubt about it. So Hatton's my second pick, with Scheffler being my number one pick. Now you may say, what about Rory? And for sure, I'd love Rory to win another major. He's certainly one of my favourite players, but at the moment, it just doesn't feel that he's there. If you look at his results over the last, few tournaments, he's been there in the hunt on the last day, but has fallen really short, and he's really struggled to sort of keep his game out of control in those final rounds. Last week at the Canadian Open, I think he shot level par on the final round, and in fact, a level par round in the US Open on the final round, if you're in the mix, could be enough to do it, depending on how tough the course is playing. But I think at the moment he just doesn't quite seem to be there. He looks quite weary, I think. When news of obviously Liv and stuff that sort of happened, he was a big advocate for PGA Tour, and I think, I can't remember the exact words, but I think he hadn't been sort of stabbed in the back, but he said words to that effect, and although he was still supporting Jay Monahan and the PGA Tour, he clearly felt that he'd really they'd really done one on him, and it just felt that he was quite tired and sort of quite weary. My understanding was that either today or tomorrow he wasn't going to do a press conference, which is quite unusual for him. So he's usually quite keen to talk to the press and do that, but isn't going to be doing that this year, or certainly tomorrow. He will do, obviously, throughout the weekend. But so I think maybe he's just wanting to sort of step out of the limelight a little bit, as much as he can do, I suppose, being one of the top players in the world. Yeah, so for me, it just doesn't feel that he's there. You can't honestly 100% count him out, but he certainly isn't for me this year, unfortunately. But yeah, so looking forward to it. It's going to be a great sort of few days. We've also got our club championship this weekend, so looking forward to that. Be nice to do well in that and get that handicap back down. And yeah, so that's it for this week, really. Nothing more to sort of cover off. Just as a reminder, I said that I'd learned a lot from Sean Evans, who I did the interview with a couple of weeks back. Do take a look at that. If you're on the YouTube, you can check the channel on YouTube. If you're listening on the podcast. Again, obviously, it's one of the podcast episodes. I think it was episode 16, so a couple of episodes ago. That was the interview with Sean Evans. Real insight into sort of local pros, and also someone who's played on the Ladies European Tour before. So, good some good content there. Hopefully, I've certainly taken a lot from the time I've spent with Sean. So it's worth taking a look if you haven't done so already. And that's it then for this week, really. Don't forget, if you go to howtopractice.com/distances, you can download your free stats tracker as well. And not your free stats tracker, your free yardage cards, so you can record your yardages for your clubs. And that's it for this week. If you've got any value, leave any comments below the video if you're watching on YouTube, or in the Q&A section on Spotify. Other than that, we'll catch up with everybody next week. Enjoy the US Open, and we'll speak next week. Thanks for watching and listening.